Kris Versteeg, of Clever, two-time Stanley Cup champion, proud Canadian, fired up today. How we doing, brother?
I am jacked up.
I know. I made a fool of myself in the 680 newsroom when I walked in here. I just started dapping everybody, giving hugs, rolling out like they're trying to do their jobs. I'm like, I don't care. I needed to roll right into the studio today. I could barely contain it.
Well, I'll tell you what. When I went to my kid's school yesterday, and every kid was wearing a Canada hockey jersey.
Oof, chills.
And you show up today, and every parent is asking, how was the game? Did you love it? They're pumped about it. That's what community is. That's what a country is. And that's exactly, what those players delivered on. That was special. Like I said, going to the school yesterday and seeing my kids wearing Canada jerseys, all the kids at school, how much it meant to the parents and every family from every walk of life. It's pretty amazing.
No, man, it's special. Like, it really is. Like, kids.
And back to I heard you touch on it. It was just another tournament. That's just such a stupid argument.
No, I know.
You put the best players on in the world, whether it's 4 countries or 8 countries. These are best on best. Tournaments have to be made up. Tournaments have to come around, and especially at a time like this in the in the world, there's nothing that was bigger, better, or more needed for the game of hockey and for the country.
Well, I want to get into the game of hockey in a bit, but I'll focus on the country for a little while because, I really don't. When I was texting with you yesterday, I really was thinking about how, kids have not seen best on best. Like, they've seen World Junior tournaments, right? But World Junior tournaments, you're looking at it and going, hey, how much of this was political? Did it take the right rosters? You can't really criticize it because it is just kids, ultimately, like, for the most part, the composition of the roster. And to your credit, like, to the players' credit, it's like these guys did embrace this. They did care. And that care resonated with everybody else. And that's what made this thing matter differently. And they carried that on their shoulders. Like, Cooper acknowledged it, that he knew the country needed a win and that the players knew that the country needed a win, that those guys are very proud to represent this country, that it's always meant something to wear the Canada sweater. And those guys took that and they once again didn't let the pressure get to them. And for the ones that say, oh, well, it's a made-up tournament because there's only 4 nations here. It's like, if it was a made-up, fake, useless tournament, why do you think guys like David Pastrnak would be tweeting like, we want to be a part of this? No, it's because they're all looking at it with great envy because it does matter, because it was a moment for hockey. I think genuinely in this country, I think you can make the case that it was actually the biggest game since the Vancouver Olympics. And I do think that it was the biggest moment for hockey that I can remember in recent history. Like, this was massive for the game to sell itself south of the border and honestly to reestablish its roots to a certain degree in this country.
It's by far the biggest game. People have talked about Italy since Vancouver. This is by far the biggest game for Canadian hockey because hockey culturally has been under attack in many ways across this nation. And for me, you walk into a rink at a young kids game, whether you go to the U.S., they believe they're with us now. And they are. They have as many kids playing hockey. They have a swagger when you walk into an American rink that it's almost been beat out of the Canadians. Mm-hmm. I hate to say it. We almost lost that FU mentality, that dog mentality of when we walk into a rink, we're Canadians. And you got to beat us. And it was almost like that since culturally it's been hockey in Canada has been honestly under attack, whether it's from the youth programming all the way up to our junior kids who had to take bullets all Christmas. And then it bled into the national program. Did we take the right guys? Can these guys do it? Is USA better? That type of win instilled in Canadian kids that were our hockey players, men or women, are dogs, right? We are, when we walk into the rink, we have that mentality. It was something when I was in the 90s, when Hockey Canada was playing the U.S., me and my dad were going into Montana. My dad's like, okay, brings me and my 3 brothers out of our car, and he goes, start pissing, right? He's like, now you're taking a piss on the American soil, and that's every time you are playing them, you need that mentality. You need to know that when you're going in there, it's damn well war on the ice. And that's the mentality that we need our hockey players to, not say exactly that, but we need to have them be the dogs again. And those players that went on the ice were the dogs again, and they instilled confidence in kids all across the nation that hockey is Canada's sport, whether, again, in the future USA beats us, but it gives that confidence across the nation to every player playing this game.
But it also showcases on that level that this is the standard, right? Like that this is the
100%.
feeling, that this is the standard and this is the feeling that you get when Canada beats the United States in this sport and gets to maintain that standard. And you know what you can tell the kids after practice or after the game? You can tell them that Canada hasn't lost best on best back-to-back to the United States in 29 years. You can tell them that Sidney Crosby now has more championships or golds, however you want to put them, than all of USA hockey put together. Like, those things matter. Those things are still clear. And instead of having yet another negative news cycle, like I totally am tapped into exactly what you're saying. Instead of having this continuation of assault on hockey, and I do think a lot of the criticisms have been fair. But
they have been fair,
yeah,
correct.
But this is just like, man, it's nice to just remember how this sport, like why it's so important to us in the first place, you know? Like the actual power of the game to unite us, the actual power of the game to make us feel something in our hearts in this country, this swelling of pride that we don't get the same way as I think the Americans do with just about every other sport. That reminder was so crucial for all of us to be able to have that shared experience again.
Yeah, and back to walking into the rink, being a proud Canadian, understanding that mentality is everything. And I couldn't stress it enough more that over the years it was, it's beat out of you almost.
Yeah.
That mentality has been beat out of you. And then, like I said, you carry it into the World Juniors. We're not good, this and that. And correct, there is a lot of fair criticism on the game. But it's the mentality of a Canadian hockey player believing they are the best, and when they walk into a rink, that they're going to take care of the job. And I think that type of game instills that across every child, boy or girl across the country, that, hey, we're coming here to do business, and we're not going to play little brother. We are the big brother, and you're going to come beat us, but we believe in ourselves, because when we walk into that rink, we're the big dog.
Well, and I think, too, is that there is still this feeling, like, if you watch the first game, right, and it was a good game, it was a back and forth game.
But
Canada.
That game was an epitome to me of them being that swagger.
That's
team.
What I'm saying. That's
them having that mental edge.
That's what I mean, though. You looked at that, and I don't know how you could. So I put a massive bet down on Canada yesterday, okay? And part of it was because it's just like my heart, where I'm like, I believe that they're going to come through. But that belief is still instilled in me, and being a Canadian fan of a certain age that has seen these games and has gone, we have that special something different where there is going to be a moment where our best player is going to get an opportunity and he's going to finish it in overtime. You know what I mean? Like, it's scary and the pucks bounce around and Binnington has to make these big saves, but there is just something about us that I still felt like we are going to be able to get this thing done. And I do think that confidence, that's going to carry over. So as much as that American swagger might be real, I don't think it was false bravado whatsoever. Like, I think that they fed off the Kachucks. God, like, how terrifying was Brady on the forecheck in that game? Like, every single
crushing guys,
buddy, every single shift he's out there, I'm going, oh, we're not going to be able to get the puck out. Like, he's going to destroy someone, and then they're going to win a puck battle, cycle it around, and then he's going to be around the net, immovable. That was real. That swagger was real. But what they are going to continue to have is, why can't we win the big one? You know, when we play Canada, when all the chips are down in the biggest of games, we're the team that fires it into Binnington's glove. Like, he comes across and turns into Superman. We're the team that leaves Connor McDavid open in the slot and he finishes it. He doesn't make those mistakes. And that is still absolutely unequivocally our edge. And that is going to continue to be our edge heading into the Olympics.
Yeah, big time. It just, I cannot stress enough. It all comes back down to your mental state heading into that game, being beaten before the game even happens. And I felt in game one, I know we came out and fought. I know we came out and scored the first goal, but it was like we were beaten before the game even happened. Mm-hmm. We allowed Tkachuk to dictate it. We allowed their physical play to dictate. We were allowed to be frustrated. The way they talked about themselves, the way they felt about their game, the way they talked about their goalies and their lineup. We were beaten before the game happened. And what yesterday did, I believe, is it reinstilled back into our players from a young age all the way to the top that, hey, we need that mentality. We need to remind ourselves how great we are as a nation, as hockey players. And when we walk into the rink, that's the mentality we need to have. And that's what that team did across the nation. Because as I said, I can't stress enough over how many years that's almost been beaten out of us.
I believe you. I believe you. And I think that, again, that's so important for kids that they can walk into arenas today in this country and hold their heads just extremely high and brim with that pride and play with that kind of passion. And
I was just in a, sorry to cut you off.
Go.
I was just in a tournament in Florida, unbelievable, held by the Gretzkys. We were playing against American teams, and, we're the Canadian team, and you could just feel the Americans, USA, every time they're playing against us, right? Mm-hmm. It was like they're very patriotic. They're very proud, and it's like you want that for our Canadian kids. We walk in there, them chanting Canada versus USA. Those are the things that the kids remember at a young age. These are the moments that kids remember. Those are what's going to allow Canadian teams to walk into American rinks now and reignite that patrioticness about themselves.
Well, and shout out to Montreal, because I actually do think that they do hockey fandom the best. I think Alberta is the next one in terms of like when you watch games on a regular basis when they're held in these spots. But ultimately, Montreal bringing that passion level right out of the gate and reminding like the Canadian players of the care that this country has, I actually do think was crucial to this team's success in the tournament. Like I will always believe that. People want like, oh, it should have finished in Montreal. I was like, no, thank God it didn't. Thank God at the very outside of this thing, the Canadians got to play in front of that crazy Montreal crowd that's chanting Sidney Crosby's name and reminding everybody what like real fans in this country feel like when they're in a packed arena caring for the red and white. And I'll transition to this in terms of like getting into the actual game, is that if I have a piece of advice for you when it comes to coaching and maintaining kind of that Canadian standard for the kids. Do you know what it is?
What is it?
Show them Sam Bennett. Show them that game that Sam Bennett played and go, here it is. This is what you can do, and this is what it's like to be a Canadian hockey player in a big moment. Because I know he didn't end up, like McDavid gets the first star because he scores the overtime winner. Binnington I'll get into. He was brilliant. Marner was spectacular with time and space. He made a couple of plays that are the ones that you're expecting them to. But I felt like watching that entire game, the guy that gave me the confidence of being like, oh, that is the new, like that is the Canadian identity, was watching Sam Bennett.
Well, it was the third line Jonathan Toews of yesterday. Like a guy that you could rely on. He's a little more gritty than John, but he's just a guy that gives you that depth down the lineup. He's going to fight for you. He's going to fight for his country. He's going to fight for every inch on the ice. He's going to find a way to score a big goal. He's going to do stuff where you're not always having to rely on the top guys to do it. And those are the guys that are the unsung heroes that come through in the big moments. And I mean, Sam, I played with Sam in Calgary. He always showed up in the playoffs. Regular season Sam was different. Playoff Sam was coming to play. And last night, a guy like Sam scoring that goal at that time off a great play by Marner, I mean, it just got us back into the game, and it was such a crucial moment. But Sam Bennett, the way he plays the game is exactly the way and what the Canadian team needed, because he was a bit of a different identity of those top guys, right? He plays a hard game. He plays 200 feet. He's really rounded it out. And if your kid's watching that, 100%, like not everybody is Connor McDavid. Even when I talk to young players, it's like, what does Connor McDavid do in the summertime? I'm like, Connor McDavid was touched by God. That's one thing. And there's one Connor McDavid on earth, but guess what? You can watch 90% of the other guys that did it through grunt work or figuring out how to play the game proper, finding out different intangibles that allows them to be successful at this level. So guys like Sam are role models to a lot of kids, because you can't always just watch the Connor McDavids. You got to watch guys like Sam. You got to watch guys like Sanheim, who came in and played well, and Harley, and these guys that do other really good things well, that make a team make a team win. Because when you pick these, you're not just picking the best. You're picking role guys that understand what they need to do to a T, and Sam is one of those guys.
Yeah, I just felt like the dog on the bone mentality, he had it all night. Like he just popped the entire game around the net, on the forecheck, scoring a big goal, making good defensive plays, finishing his checks. Like he was just all around it. And that's just kind of it. What you touched on there is, yeah, not every kid can be McDavid. Not every kid can be McKinnon. And no disrespect to Sam Bennett. Like he went 4th overall in the draft, right? Like he's not some scrubby guy that was like, oh yeah, he's found in the 6th round. Like he was a high pedigree player. There's no question. But if you look at it, to me, it's kind of like the basketball thing, why Steph Curry matters more than LeBron, is because you can look at Steph Curry and be like, hey, that's a 6'2" guy who figured out and honed his skills in a way through work. And with Sam Bennett, yeah, I don't think that maybe you can teach that dog in a kid, like to the degree that he clearly has it. Like, I don't know, you would probably be better knowing that, having been around, not only the pro level, but also coaching kids now for, God, years. But yeah, I think you could look at him and say, I can be Sam Bennett. Like, I might not be the best player on my team. Yeah, I can be Brandon Hagel. I can be Sam Bennett.
Yeah, these are guys, not so much Sam, but Brandon. Think about his path. I was with Brandon in Rockford, Illinois.
Yeah.
When at the end of my career, and he was just a young guy that came in. I think it was his 2nd draft through. And I remember his first ever exhibition game, and I talked to him a little bit before that. I said, you got to do something different than everyone else. And he went out there. He was slashing guys, punching guys in the face. It was like he was just not going to be denied. And that was Brandon Hagel's mindset too. It's just not willing to not be denied, figuring out what other things I can do better than the next guy to get that job. And those are the guys that they figure it out a little bit later. They figure out what works for them and what doesn't. And the biggest common theme that those guys have is a high motor. They don't stop, like you said, dog on bone, and a willingness to not be denied. And they're going to find a way to do it. They're going to find a way to get noticed, and they're going to find something that works for them. And it's just such a inspirational thing to look at guys like that have come from where they have, especially Brandon Hagel or those guys that found ways to get there, and they were not going to be denied.
Well, and even just like, again, I do think that, like, people have talked about the Kachucks in that first game being performative. Like, I've seen some criticism of that. I don't agree with it, because I actually think that part of the reason that they did that was not simply for the cameras. It was to establish, hey, we're bigger than you and we're stronger than you. Like, that
100%.
is what mindset. We are. Like, you used to be the big bullies. Go look at old Canada highlights of just the absolute monster hits that this team has leveled in the past on these teams, right? Like, who was it the other day? I was watching Joe Thornton.
Kachuk and like Adam Foote stick swinging at each other.
Yeah, yeah, that's a good.
Like full baseball swinging.
Yes, but I thought that was we're going to go out there and we're going to remind them that we're the more physical team and that we've got these big boys right out of the gate. And yet still, like, the one thing for me that I'm like, you kind of underestimated is you fought 2 undersized guys in the first couple that were nasty and that answered the bell and held their own, because they are those dogs. And I went, God, those guys played that way that entire tournament. They were fired up. It ignited that. I don't think that they needed the added motivation. I think that they are those kind of players that you're talking about in Bennett and in Hagel. But that, yeah, you show that to kids and you're like, look at all the size they're giving up. Not what is the size of the dog? It's the dog or size to fight the dog. Like that, those guys were the epitome of that for Canada. And so, yeah, I'm going to get into some of the bigger guys in this tournament, or at least like some of the stars and the Leafs. But man, oh man, I felt like those guys were so crucial to the identity, to the win. Like, obviously Bennett ends up scoring that massive game-tying goal, but just in general, like, that is what made me feel like we still have our version of what has always been our game, was getting to see those guys. Because we've always had skill. We're always going to have top-tier skill. That'll never go away. But keeping that type of mentality in a game, oh, God, it was crucial to me. So let me get into the old guys. How important do you think it was that we didn't age out that generation, the Doughties, the Sids, and the Marchands?
When I saw Drew added to the lineup, a lot of people were worried about it. It was huge, because you have a guy that can still play at a high level. Is he what he was? No, but he is at a level that can calm a game down. You can talk to him on the bench. It's not like that old guy that comes in that can't play and speaks, and you're like, dude, you can't even get on the ice. adding a guy like Drew into an environment like that where he's played in hostile environments, whether it's in the NHL 2010, and he can still contribute, having him and Brad and Sid there who can still do that was huge to the team. And I think it was bigger to them than it was to the USA, because who really was the USA's oldest guy or who's been around that could still contribute at a high level? Kreider maybe, but Kane would have been that guy, I would say, but he didn't make the team. So having guys that contribute at a high level, that have been there and done that have been in those environments, that could calm the guys down, that could talk to the younger guys on the bench, was critical to the Canadian game. And whether it was in that, think about Finland when they made it 4-3, right? Sid goes on the ice and gets the job done, ends the game. I mean, there's still a minute left in the game. Think about even in the Sweden game, they go into OT. Who's the guy that makes the play? A drop pass. Like, I would have been like crapping my pants there, skating up the ice, throwing the puck back. You know, think about the guys in the key moments that got around the puck, that probably were on the bench talking to guys. And I would assume that those were the three guys that were doing it time and time again on the bench and on the ice.
Yeah. So a couple things for me on Doughty in general. So I had Dan Hamuse on yesterday, and I was asking him about, Sid and Doughty and having played with them on the 2014 team. And it didn't really strike me until the moment of how important it is to have that dichotomy of leader, where you have one guy who is the do it by example. And I think Sid's got, I think Sid probably has his funnier moments than people, has a little bit more personality than people give him credit for. Saw a clip after the game where he's going up to Bergeron's kids and he grabs the back of the jersey because Marchand's there, and he's like, "Oh, that's the same size as Marshy." And I was
I got a great Sid story.
Oh, hit me.
Oh, okay. So in when I'm in Carolina, I was checking Sid all night. And, he wasn't having the best game. And then he comes by the bench. He goes, "Hey, Versteeg." I'm like, "Yeah." He goes, "I remember when you used to be good." And I'm like, I look at the coaches. I'm like, "Touche."
Yeah, he's snappy, right? He'll throw the one-liners around. They're there, they're documented. But yeah, I just thought a little bit more of a quiet leader, intense guy, right? Boiling over with intensity, passion, needing to get it done. Extreme self-criticism versus, and then having Drew Doughty, someone who's yapping on the bench, keeping it light, being funny, acting as though it's just cool. It's just another game, different kind of, just a complete opposite from what Sid was. And in that game too, there was one big moment for me with Doughty, which is that forecheck that we mentioned. That American forecheck was scary. Their boys were big. They clearly had a plan, and that was to dump, and that was to chase, and that was to hit the Canadians and force them to scramble after they had laid those big hits. And if you go through that and you watch that carefully, people are going to break down this film. Go look how many times Drew Doughty makes the right play and is completely unafraid to take a hit. He
took more hits.
Yeah.
On the forecheck than anybody.
Yep.
Willing to willing to make a play to take a hit by bodies that are much bigger than him. And he's a big boy.
And he's old.
He's a thick guy. And he is old. And he wore some checks. What was that on the second period, Brady, when he
crushed him.
Yeah. He was willing to take hits and pop back up and go right back at it again. And think about teaching young kids, I'm not saying that's the right play all the time, right? You got to be smart about it. But in the big moments, in the big games, you got to be willing to do whatever it takes to win. I remember thinking about, even personally myself, Stanley Cup Finals. I can't imagine what these guys are feeling. But you got to almost have the fearlessness of willing to die on the ice. That's almost where you have to be mentally in order to win. And those guys are taking absolute body blows going back for the puck, and he was doing it time and time again as an older guy who's been through the ringer time and time again.
Yeah, no, he was exceptional. And I think the difference too, to kind of close out on those guys, with the Americans not having the Canes or that past generation of player, is that they're trying to turn the page, right? For Canada, it was more important to have those guys there because there's a torch to actually pass. For the Americans, it's what are you passing? Losing all the games, right? You want to come in and be no, this is a younger group of players that are all in their prime. It's a bigger group of players. It's a different mindset group of players. It's not the USA hockey that we left in 2014 or that you saw in 2010, that this is supposed to be the new chapter. But for Canada, it's you're still trying to maintain a legacy. You want to have that line like royalty where you don't have any breaks in it. And you're going, nope, this is this descendant to this descendant to this descendant. This is this royal bloodline. And that's why, to me, it was like critical that you did have those guys and that Doughty ended up being on that team. And it felt like you did actually have a little bit more representation when Pietrangelo dropped out and that he was just the perfect guy from not only a style of play and a toughness and an attitude, but just the personality that he would have given off in that room to those guys. Oh, God, I'm probably like a little overly romantic about it, but I really do think that it meant something for those guys to be there.
Something.
What?
It means something because it's a mesh of personalities.
Yeah.
You can't just take 20 guys that think the same way or do it the same way. You need guys that, like you said, keep the room light. You need guys that are super serious. You need guys that are a little bit quirky. You need a blend of personality, but you need the common goal. They all got to be driven the same way for the same common goal. Mm-hmm. And having guys with different personalities who think differently, who look at life differently, who look at different things, that's a good thing, right? Mm-hmm. It creates different perspective, but they all need to have one common thing, and that's winning at all costs. And every single guy in that room has the same common theme on winning.
Yeah. And again, the younger players get to see it. And the contrast for me too, in terms of like the lasting effect of that and why I think it's so important to have those like standard passers, those torchbearers, is that with the Americans, like I mentioned, how it was like, hey, this is a new attitude. This is a new era. That team felt very connected and they looked like they were playing for something. And when I did see Canada, it kind of felt like, I would see moments where it was Marchand trying to like dig in on Marner, right? Where he's like, nice one, Mitchie, after the overtime winner. And it was like, so these guys don't look like super tight. Now they've got this incredible bonding moment that they've all had together. And it's still going to be the vast majority of these players that are on the team going into the Olympics, right? It's probably going to be maybe a couple of players different, right?
I hope there's some different players.
I do too. I think that Celebrini's probably going to crack that lineup. I hope that they bring Tom Wilson next time and that they realize like, oh boy, yeah, maybe we should have had him.
Well, I think you got to look at Hyman Bedard as a winger.
Oh, I'm not touching Bedard.
No, I think you're looking at a guy like that as your 13th winger, a game breaker in case someone else goes down. Like you said, Fantilli, you got these other guys, but I think you got to really look at Wilson and Hyman kind of round out because I do think we were missing a little bit of that size and heaviness. Yeah. Not so much dog, like you got Konechny, who's a little guy, but he's a dog. I think you were missing a little bit of that heaviness to our game.
I agree. Like, listen, I won't even name who the guys I would have thought should have been off, but yeah, they were smaller players down the lineup where I went. If you're going to bring Bennett and you're going to bring Hagel and you're going to have the Cirelli line, like that can be your dog line of smaller guys. Like I need some big boys in the lineup. And again, Pietrangelo would have changed that on the blue line. Morrissey would have changed that on the blue line. There's other ways that they could have had it without just like actually even removing guys that were supposed to be there. But yeah, I think that for me, the one miss was Tom Wilson, maybe even Scheifele in that game where it was like, God, would have felt great to have a line of just like mutants, just huge.
This is heavier guys.
Yeah.
And like, it's not to say I was a smaller player. It's good to have those kind of dog on bone, high motor, small guys too. But
I felt like too many on this team.
I thought, yeah, exactly. I thought Tom Wilson could have been inserted into the lineup, especially with how good of a season he's having. Or Hyman. You already know Hyman plays well with McDavid. Why are you kind of creating other concoctions when you could already had Hyman there? Well, that does exactly what's needed for a guy like Connor, and then put him with a Marner.
Yeah, well, especially when there were moments where I was like, yeah, Marner didn't look like a good fit. And then he gets bumped down. And then I'm watching Stone out there with him, and I was like, this doesn't feel good either. Like, I'm not feeling his impact on the game the same way. So, yeah, maybe some of it is just, like, having that continuity.
Forecheck, right? It's that forecheck where you need a guy like that to go get the puck for Connor.
Yep. I actually thought the same thing watching with Matthews, where I was like, God, this really works for him. Obviously, you're not going to be able to just get the Kachucks with him, but having someone like that's – if I'm Matthew Nyes and I was watching this game, I'm like, I got to – continue to steal from Brady Tkachuk. Like I just have to watch his game over and over and over again and go, this is who I want to be and this is who I need to be. And I'm going to have to try to emulate a little bit more of that nastiness because I do think that he's big, strong, and willing. But yeah, God, that a little bit of extra oomph. It's like that might be the thing that works with Auston. Okay, so yeah, let's get into Leafs a little bit here. How big do you think that game was for Marner and Matthews? Because both of them played great, minus Matthews makes the mistake that leads to the final goal.
if you're talking about the final goal, that's a collective thing. So that's a weak side rim where your weak side winger has to bust back to the net, and your weak side D, because it's going from strong side to weak side really quick, they have to be able to help too. Your centerman's kind of in an area. They're not playing man-on-man D zone. So, like, to say it's only Auston's fault not finding Connor in the slot, that's not really his guy. They play more of a zone D. So when the box shifts, your weak side winger, which is actually Brock Nelson, has to come right back. He's got to reload right back to the slot. And same with your weak side D. When your D are shifting, your D's got to be able to pick up someone too. So, yes, it could be blamed on Auston a little bit for not, maybe being in a better lane or having his head on a swivel. But the way that they play D zone, that's a collective mistake. I think that's your winger's not getting back to the correct area, your D's not on a swivel, and you're not talking to your centerman about a possible guy open. So just talking about that play quickly. Now, looking at the Leafs and, as the tournament started, both guys, I know Marner scored the goal, which was huge, but I wasn't really happy with their game.
Neither was I.
That final game, both guys showed up.
Yep.
Auston showed up, had a great game, could have ended it. Bennington went off in overtime. Mitch makes, he picks the puck up off the wall, draws a guy to him, makes a play into the slot to Connor. Like, where I'm happy with those guys, they showed up in the big moments. Yep. Auston wanted to be the difference in the big moment. He was just denied. Had 2 assists in the game. I think this bodes well for their confidence going forward that say, we're playing a best-on-best tournament. We came to play in the biggest game at the biggest time. So I'm hoping that this is, Austin's probably not feeling good today, but I hope this is a big confidence builder for him going forward, as it should be, that, man, I can get the job done when it's needed. One guy needed to win. One guy needed to lose. If it was Auston today, we'd be talking about Mitch, right? But Mitch did come and play really, really well when all the chips were down, and you got to be really happy for both Leafs.
I am, and so I think that you're right. Matthews is not looking at this as anything to celebrate, right? Like, he already believes in himself. He doesn't think like he's a bad performer and big. Like, I just don't believe that he thinks that. I'm sure he's thought about it. Like, I'm sure he's seen his Game 7 stats like anybody else would, that he's aware of the narratives around him, but that his inner belief is not like, oh, I shrink when the moment gets big. So he's probably down in the dumps about it, but there's just no question that he was the second scariest American player in that game, right?
No question.
Brady was 1 and he was 2, and he was so scary around the net. And it was an interesting feeling because, I've never rooted against Auston Matthews. And I'm watching going against him. I'm like, oh, this is a very uncomfortable, not so good feeling. And so I thought that was kind of like an important perspective for people who judge the Leafs to be able to watch it. Like, what is it like when you're feeling that this guy is going to be dangerous and was dangerous in terms of some of the narratives around him? But yeah, I thought that the areas that he was involved in too, right? Like the ways that he was creating goals, hopefully that to me is a bit of a reminder for him moving forward, or hopefully there's some type of groove that's created with that where he's like, oh, right, being around the net and sometimes not just looking for the perfect shot, but just trying to create a play by forcing a rebound and knowing that someone else is going to be there at the net front to bang it home. Like, those are winning plays to me. So I thought Matthews' good game. The only thing I'll say about I'm not going against your expertise on this one. I just thought that like he was kind of puck watching a little bit. Like, it's Mitch.
He was puck watching.
It's Mitch Marner, and it's like he's got the puck on the perimeter. Like, I didn't play, and I'm not like, it's easy to judge when you're watching it from 100 feet and breaking it down this way. But it's like, you got to know if you're the defensive center, like that Connor McDavid is standing there right in the slot and that you're rushing out to send a second man to Mitch Marner. Like, especially when that playmaker has time and space to be able to feed it over to him.
Yeah, so 100%. He was puck watching, no doubt. It's generally center on center off of a face-off, and he was center on center, and then the puck went out to the weak side and rim back, right? So generally when that happens, it shifts into your zone. So you're basically trying to 2-on-1 a guy in the corner at that point, or you got to look for open guys, and you got to rely on guys behind you doing their jobs as well. So he was puck watching. I think it was a collective fault. Whether it's Brock
that's
Nelson,
fair. I think that you should always kind of put it that way, even as a leadership core. But yeah, it was a big moment for him too, like just that game in general. Because I said it going into that game, he didn't feel like the captain to me. I didn't even feel like he was a guy that should have been wearing a letter before that game. And then based on that performance, I was like, oh, okay, no. if you're an American hockey fan and you're Auston Matthews, I think your like pecking order or your place on that team was very, very clear. And to Marner's side, like credit to John Cooper for seeing it, right? And moving on it right away where he went, oh, Mitch has it. Because there were a couple of plays before that where Marner looked like himself, where he was cool, calm, and felt like he was creating more space with defenseman not willing to just like try and take it away from him. And then he created with it well. It's like the first pass is beautiful. The second one was for it too. And Mitch had some big early games against Boston early in his career where it felt like, oh my God, this guy is going to be the Maple Leaf. I think that specifically the play that I'll always remember for him was actually a block shot where Toronto had the lead in the first series against Boston. But I actually think that was the biggest game of Marner's career from a like success standpoint that he can build off of. And like when we're doing the evaluation of him moving forward, like that game has to be a part of the puzzle piece when evaluating who he is moving forward and what he does in the playoffs.
100%. But think about what we've been talking about with Mitch with the Leafs. Now, the Leafs roster is not Hockey Canada roster. It's not even close.
No.
But what happened to Mitch? They moved him down in the lineup. What did Mitch do when he was given more of a chance later on in the tournament? He showed up. I'm not saying move Mitch down the lineup always with the Leafs, but at times you got to move them down and make them work, whether they're a star, to get back, right? And John noticed as that game was going on, certain things weren't working. He moved him back, or Mitch actually was going well, but then he moved him back to Connor's line. And good things happened. Mitch fought back to get back there, and he showed up when he was needed, when he was on that line. So I was just happy because he was dealing with some adversity. You know, people talk about, he's playing 12 minutes. Lois played forward. Not to say that's going to happen on the Leafs minute-wise, but sometimes you move guys down the lineup, and then once they're going again or you're needed again, you move them back up. And that's kind of how it worked. And when Mitch got moved back up, he made room for McDavid. He made great plays to McDavid. He showed up when he was needed in big moments when he got put back on that line. So he had to fight through a little adversity to get back there, and he showed up when he was needed. So I think that's where I'm most proud of Mitch is when you get moved down lineups, you can wilt, right? You can be like, oh, how are you going to take this? What's your mindset? But when he got, he went down there, he did his job, he got moved back up, and he showed up when he was needed the most. That's where I'm most proud of Mitch.
Yeah. No, again, this is an ideal tournament for Leafs fans because Canada wins. Your guys showed up in the biggest game, and you don't have any lasting nightmare memory where you were so close to one with Matthews potentially burying Canada. You're like, I don't know how it felt moving forward.
Well, I could have. Think if he went down the lineup and didn't show up, and then Matthews doesn't show up, what we'd be talking today.
Well, going into that game, my feeling was like my prevailing feeling. And I'm not going to say I'm moving off of this entirely because I still think it's going to be a thought exercise moving forward here. But it's like Marner wants to be paid like one of the highest guys in the NHL, right? And you're watching this tournament and there's the Haggles who are making like 8.5, right? And Bennett when he goes to free agency and what he's going to command. And ultimately, like he's a winger, not one of these top tier centers. And you watched him throughout the tournament compared to like McDavid and McKinnon and like Braden Point. And I couldn't help but think, like, is this really a guy that you think is going to be worth $13 million? And I think that's still a question, and he's still got to show a lot come playoff time. Like, that's not answered. But he did not look like he was a part of that group. Like, he did not look like he was a part of the top-tier guys in this country or in this tournament of impact. And last night he was. Like, last night he took a step forward to kind of show people, you know what, I'm one of the dudes that is a difference maker in this league. I had the two biggest passes in this game because Matthews' other two primary assists were like shot attempts, right? They weren't setups. Like Mitch did that. Mitch, as the playmaker, made plays and directly impacted this game in a tight checking game where there was not a ton of space out there. He made space. So big credit to him. Yeah. Big credit to him.
Yeah, and like you said, that all those questions are going to get answered. What his value is? I mean, when you're comparing anyone to the top talent on the U.S. and Canada with our top three guys and theirs, I mean, it's just no comparison.
But that's the problem is that's kind of where he's been trying to kind of make the money comparisons, right? Is like he wants closer to Matthews' money, and you're like, oh, that's what happens. It's like not us driving it; it's been him.
Yeah. So I mean. I don't even know how to answer that right now. I still think he is, he's worth 12 and a half. Once you start to get up there, you're starting to get into tricky territory with a winger.
Agree. Okay, so last thing. Actually, you know what? God, I got still so much left on the bone, but we got to run here. All right. Do you think that goal, how big do you think that goal was for McDavid? Because I don't think he played a very good game.
He wasn't good.
Yeah.
I thought you were going to ask that. Yeah, McDavid wasn't good. There was a lot of times, too, where, I even said it. I was watching the game like, man, he's rushing plays. Yep. Like, he would cut the top of the circle in the ozone, and he'd rush a pass rather than attacking with the puck. Or he's coming off the rush, he button hooks, and instead of holding on to the puck and, like, creating more space, he's rushing plays that are missing late guys coming into the zone. And it was just like that could be nerves, right? You don't want to make the mistake at a big time of the game. But he got away from his game, I thought, and I thought he was rushing it quite often. And then even pucks, like, I remember the D rimmed it around the back of the wall, it bounced over his stick, and as a hockey player, when things aren't going good and those things start to happen, it can start to go the other way. So for Connor to come through at that time, at that moment, was massive for him, massive for his legacy.
Yep.
Because when you're not playing your best game, but you still find a way to get the job done at the biggest moment, at the biggest time, that's just got to be the biggest relief to that guy, to show, hey, I can get the job done in the biggest moments. And hopefully as it goes forward, it allows him to free up himself a little bit when the times get tough in the biggest moments going down the stretch and into a cup run.
Yeah, I think that it's like it's a weighty thing to be the best player on Team Canada, right?
I couldn't imagine the pressure.
Yeah, exactly. And so for him to have already had a moment, like, I got to think that takes some of the pressure off because, honest to God, I'd love to hear from Oilers fans that have watched him throughout his entire career and watched every playoff game closely. It's like, I've never seen him look like he was playing rushed and that he looked nervous. And I thought that was what was happening in that game. Like, Slavin is incredible, right? Like, I actually thought, like, one of the takeaways was, wow, this guy is, like, is he the most valuable defenseman outside of, like, Makar and hockey? Like, which one of those two guys had the bigger impact on that hockey game? Like, he just felt everywhere and an awful, so good, so incredibly good. I'm sorry, I'm not watching enough of his games. Like, I wasn't familiar with it being that level of quality. So I was like, okay, some of it is clearly that and the way that America is making him such a focus of their game plan. But my God, he looked tight, and that's got to be something for him.
He's the top defensive D-man in the league.
Yeah, no, I mean, that felt very established in that game. Like, that really did. Hey, buddy, it feels good. I'm so happy for the kids. I'm so happy that they're going to be wearing the Canada sweaters and that everybody's going to be walking around, like I said, feeling that joy, feeling like, there's positive things to talk about hockey and that, we can take this and hopefully continue the exceptionalism moving forward. Thanks for making time, brother.
100%. Be proud to be Canadian.
100%. 100%.